Sound off for Tammy's benefit?
Yes.
Watching from.
Yes, she's watching from her office. I'll explain all that. I know it should.
Even if we.
Warren, sorry. Warren is.
No, no, he called me today, he didn't, he had people from out of town.
No worries. I know. Yes, because she is not.
All we need is a quorum to take. All right, so welcome. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. The first roll of business will be a roll call. So I will start out and we'll just go around the room for the benefit of recording who's here. So Scott Elliott, and we'll go to the left. Go ahead, Bridget.
Bridget Johnson, present. Terry.
Please use your microphones.
Oh, and I'm sorry, they do not know how to do that properly.
Oh, Jimmy warned me that I should have done that to begin, and I blew it already, Jimmy, sorry.
Press the button on the left-hand side, such as this. The microphone will come on, and when you are finished speaking, the microphone will go off, and you may need this in the future to answer questions with the. So, Bridget Johnson, present.
Maria Terry.
Dan Wilsonic.
Charlie Heiner.
Megan Parker.
Clark Turner.
Rich Weiner.
Jason Robertson.
Okay, thank you. We should have some others that'll join us, and they can come in, and we'll make sure that they are recorded in the minutes. First official piece of business will be to approve the minutes that were from the June 21st meeting. We had no meeting in July, so if you want to take a brief minute to look at those minutes, please let me know if you have any questions, and if not, I'll just need a motion to accept the minutes.
Make a
I
motion
so
to.
move. Oh, sorry.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any comments? Okay, the minutes will carry, and we will move into the reports and start with Bridget for the Department of Economic Development and Tourism.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Normally I report last. We moved the agenda around a little bit today because I just wanted to welcome everyone back. Missed you dearly during the month of July. We're in August. We have a lot going on, but I want to spend the bulk of this meeting with our guest today, which is the Director of Planning, Tim Boussier. And we have members of the consultant team for Havre Memorial Hospital redevelopment watching us via YouTube, as well as any other citizens who else may be watching also. So I'm going to keep my comments short and saying, welcome back, everyone. If there's time at the end of the meeting, we could talk about some things coming up in September. But for now, I'm just going to keep the meeting flowing. I'm going to pass this over to Councilmember Jason Robertson if he has a report. The Harford County Office of Economic Development is not here at this moment, so after Councilman Robertson finishes, I will introduce my colleague and we'll get moving on the conversation about the redevelopment of the hospital. So without further ado, Councilmember Jason Robertson, do you have a report for us this month?
Thank you. Just the biggest thing that everybody should be aware of here in this body is the first reading and the public hearing for ordinance number 1114 has already happened. Second reading is this coming Monday, and that is to give the administration the authority to provide a tax incentive for private property owners in the downtown area to use their vacant lots for parking. So it's something that I think folks might be interested in taking a look at and being aware of. Back to you, Bridget.
Why, thank you, Councilmember Robertson. If you did not see the council meeting from Monday night, it is also available on the City of Havre de Grace YouTube channel. It is always well worth watching, and this ordinance is very important, so I would get yourself familiar with it, if you will. So I would also like to introduce our Director of Planning, Mr. Timothy Boussier, and from this point on, he will take over. But again, I know everyone on this board has met him at some point, and he is the lead on the redevelopment of the Havre Memorial Hospital at this time. And from there, you got it, Tim. Thanks.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. I guess I'll just give you a brief update where we are with the project and tell you what we're doing today. I'll have some questions for you, you'll have some questions for me, and then we can wrap it up. Hopefully it'll be that easy. In February of next year, the hospital plans on closing. That's a done deal. We've known it for some time. We didn't have an exact date, but now that we know it, we know it's February. In the next 3 to 4 months after that, they'll decommission the hospital, move patients where they need to move them, move staff, and by late spring, early summer of next year, the hospital doors will be closed. So we're looking at the zoning for that site, since it'll be an empty site and everything that you could potentially do there, but we're also looking at the larger residential office district. So just a little background, there was no zoning in the city until 1982. And the zoning in the downtown area was put there to sort of fit in what had already been there for, in some places, 100 years, 200 years. So the zoning that was put in place around the hospital were uses that were allowed to support the hospital. Doctor's offices, medical supply, bed and breakfast were included because there was some of that there, but it was really a district that was set up for the hospital and to provide additional uses to go along with the hospital. For some time, the city's had some incentive that if you turn one of those office buildings in that district back to residential, that they could provide you a tax break. Because the hospital has already sort of slowed down, a lot of the businesses that were periphery to the hospital have also sort of left. So we're looking at that district as a whole of how to, what changes can be made there to complement also the closing of the hospital. So while the hospital site being vacant is the big piece, we're looking at sort of everything as a whole. We had a public participation meeting on July 28th. I know a lot of you were present. We got a lot of great input. That was just a listening session. When we hired consultants to help us with this project, it was one of the consultant suggestions that we just listen to the public, provide an opportunity for people to say whatever they wanted to say about the hospital and what should go there, and why. It wasn't where we had anything finished and we were sort of providing them any kind of idea of what was going to be done. Not that we can really do that anyway. It's a privately held property, so the city's limited in the controls that they have, although we can do some creative things. That occurred. I think we got a lot of great information from that project. I think we learned a lot about why people are using the hospital now and some of the things that will really be how people will really be affected if some of those medical uses go away. And we heard a lot about what people didn't want there. So we had a lot of people saying they didn't want to see it turn into the Bully Rock of this area, that they wanted it returned to its normal state. We heard a lot of information about returning Lodge Lane back to the city and connecting it back through where the hospital site is now. And then we had a lot of questions, just people not knowing that the hospital was closing down and not knowing what city officials had done to try to keep the hospital here or attract another hospital. So I can answer some of those questions today if any of you have that. That whole session was recorded. That is also on our website, on our YouTube page. So if anybody wanted to go back and watch that, that is a possibility. So today we're going to do something sort of similar to what we did at the listening session. We'll have some more specific questions that came from that the architects want to ask and have answers on. They're watching now on YouTube. from their offices in Philadelphia. I have my phone on me, so if a follow-up question comes up, I'll get a text. So I'm not ignoring you if I look down at my phone. So with that, I'll just start with any questions you guys have before I get into my set of questions. Good, okay. So you can answer these things as individuals. I think, part of when we put the contract together with the consultants, we did look at all of you as the Economic Development Advisory Board. So I think we are looking for input from an economic development perspective, if that can be offered, but also don't shy away from any other input you would have. Also, we do, if for some reason you think about something after this, or you don't feel like speaking about this today, or Wednesday is the new Monday, and your head's just not working right, we have an online form you can fill out, so I'll pass that information to Bridget, and she can pass that to all of you, and you can pass that on. But that way you can go online, and there's 4 questions on there, or 3 questions in a comment section, and you can go ahead and put whatever information you want in there, or if you want to pass it along to others, that'll be great. One other quick thing before I get into questions. On the 2nd, let me just look at the date so I have it for you. So on September 11th at 6:30, we'll meet with the Planning Commission. They'll have a similar session to this, but for each group that we meet with, we're sort of boiling these questions down and kind of moving to a different public input format, so we're not just asking the same questions over and over. All of you are welcome to attend. It's a public hearing. That'll be more probably focused. We'll have some initial renderings of what the zoning district could look like. We'll have the plan is to hopefully have some pictures of development in town and in other places, and just have the Planning Commission discuss their thoughts on that. It's not a workshop, so I believe the public would also be able to attend. On September 28th, we'll boil that session down from the Planning Commission and have a bigger public input meeting, and that'll be at the Star Center at 6:30, and that one's going to be widely advertised like the one for the Opera House. So those are both upcoming meetings, and we're just, like I said, we're sort of using information from each one and synthesizing that down and trying to get to some point where we can get to what we're trying to do. Which reminds me, I guess we should take a step back. We're looking at changing the RO zoning district, but we're doing something called form-based zoning, is what we're looking at in the area. So form-based code isn't just written word, and it's not full renderings as you would see in a development plan, but it provides forms for different sections. So maybe what you would see on Union would be different from what would be on Lodge Lane, which would be different from what's on Washington. And uses eventually will matter, but from the beginning point, we're just looking at form. So a good example would be on Union. You have these large style Victorian houses. So at this point in time, we're not necessarily looking at architectural design guidelines. We're just sort of looking at the form that would go on Union that would fit with the rest of Union Avenue. It's not so important at the beginning of whether you can fit 15 or 20 residential units in there, if that's a single family Victorian style home, if it's a bed and breakfast, if it's commercial on the bottom or offices on the bottom with something above. We're just looking at form and connection, and then we add the uses later. And it's a lot different from what we have here traditionally, but it's the way that we're going to try to reconnect all those areas back together. So I'll get in my questions if any of you don't have any questions now that I gave all that info.
One question before we
Sure.
go too much further, and I should have said something, Tim, about it early on, but can you just give an overview of the property? We don't have a plat. I think it's been a long time since I've seen one, but how many parcels are we talking about? How big's roughly each one? Just give us a bird's eye view.
I have a couple boards I can actually just run in my office and grab real quick if you guys want to see them. You just give me 2 minutes? Yeah.
I have been,
And you didn't need your microphone.
Beatles' microphone doesn't work. We've purposely taken care of that.
listen, real quickly, Tammy is watching, so she's texting me as she observes. One, we need to vote for the minutes again because we didn't have a quorum, but now that Beetle is here, we do. And Beetle, the microphone, when you're looking at it there, if you look at the buttons to the left and you hit it, a green light will come on. You're on, and then don't forget to turn it off. So let's do a test run. Hello, Beetle. Is it is?
Is that on?
Okay. And then you
I'll
can
turn
hit it
it off.
again and it'll turn off. Okay.
We'll let you practice because we will go ahead, for the benefit of the minutes, we'll go ahead and approve the minutes again. So everyone's had a chance to look at them. I just need a motion from the floor to approve the minutes. Okay, that was it. Dan? Charlie?
Reiner.
Has moved. Do I have a second? Okay,
By Dan.
we've got a second. All approved. All for the minutes.
Approved.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, they carry. Go ahead, Tim. Sorry to interrupt you.
Thank you.
So I'll leave these here, you guys can pass them around. Oh, awesome. I'll get this one the other side if that's all right. So I don't have the figures on the total residential office district, but the hospital itself is 6.56 acres. Not all of that is necessarily developable. There's a property all the way on the east. That's about half an acre. That's in the critical area. That would require some pretty strict stormwater requirements, so it may not make sense to do anything there. There's also a 0.3 acre parcel, 0.29 acre parcel north of the existing garage that they were considering maybe having as a park. On the north side of Revolution, there's a 0.28 acre parcel where there's parking currently. There was discussion about putting an ambulance depot there, but that's still in discussion. And then on the south side of Lewis Lane, there's some existing doctor's offices that are about a half acre. They were considering using that for continued community health initiatives that they have now. So what we're really looking at is where the hospital, the main part of the hospital is now, is 3 acres if you round. And then on the east side of Washington, there's about another 1.3 acres. That'll be all considered for development.
Another 3 acres east side of Washington.
No, 1.1 acre. Sorry, and that'd be 4 acres total.
And
Hey,
Tim, I
Tim,
think,
would you mind telling me again what part is in critical areas and can't be built on?
Yeah, there's a parcel on the northeast corner of Lewis and Strawberry Lane.
And that can't be built on?
It could be, but the stormwater requirements are so stringent that I'm not sure that the juice will get the squeeze.
Okay.
The fruit will get anyway. It
And-
won't work.
I remember from the meeting at the Opera House, there was someone gave a discussion on, I guess, the ability of the parking garage to support additional weight of buildings on top of it.
Right, that was Volney Ford.
Okay. I just want to make sure that was part of the conversation, because that's actually not just a building sitting there that could stay there, but also something that could be put on top of it.
That is, I mean, that's completely verified. I mean, a structural study could be performed to do that, but I think when Mr. Ford had said that, the person he said it came from, he said it as if it was the
Okay, we don't know
the
that
truth.
as fact then.
Yeah. I mean, it requires a lot of study, so that's a possibility. There was also there's a basement underneath the existing hospital. People had mentioned something about putting underground parking there as a possibility. So there's a few of these ideas that are out there that they've not been vetted yet, that really need to be looked into. I wouldn't get too excited about them either way.
Roger that.
Uh-huh.
So Tim, I'm sorry, one more question, then I'll
Sure,
stop.
no problem.
There's 9, so I'm counting 9 parcels? in total?
There's more parcels. So on the east side of Washington, they show just one big square, but that's actually a bunch of separate different parcels. They just grouped them together into one. So, I mean, they have all the properties correctly bounded, but the total number of parcels I don't have
Okay,
I don't have here.
it's fine, I got you.
I guess that takes me into my first question, though, since we spoke about the garage. I know they had one on here. Is there a preference to have the garage retained for shared use, private use, public use? Were there any kind of thoughts on the use of the garage and what would happen with that? Like, should it be used for the public in general? Should part of it be considered for that? Just what's everybody's thoughts on the parking garage generally? Should it be used at all?
Whoever hits first gets to answer.
Move it downtown.
It's like a game. Go ahead, Dan.
Clearly, parking is at a premium, but because of its location, it would only really be used when we'd be having high-volume events.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be a structure that would be sitting there, hardly getting used. My reaction is we probably should lean toward doing something else with that structure.
Dan, you mean if it's not used by whatever is there, you mean if it's used publicly? Wouldn't get much use?
One, publicly, yeah, if there's, yeah, I mean, it would go without saying, if it goes toward private use, that means there's somebody who needs, whatever that is, 100 parking spaces, right? So that's a no-brainer, but if it goes to public use, I would wonder if that's a good use of public property, because it's only going to get used the 4th of July and who knows when else, because not much happens there. Unless the redevelopment of the property is very high density, then again, that by that nature, that parking lot becomes critical because they're going to need to meet the parking requirements.
I agree with that. Block.
Yeah.
So I can't see that. I hate to not do anything with it, but just keeping it for parking, just for parking's sake, it's just kind of lip service. I mean, unless you're going to have a trolley purposely going there, but.
Well, we have to remember that it's not ours, so
Right, that's
we're
true.
talking about an asset that, I think there was a gentleman that spoke who was actually a developer at your July 28th meeting, and said something, was talking about massing plans and having to get together, developers going to start looking at this and saying, okay, what is there, what can I do? So from our perspective, if Volney Ford was right, and there's more to that parking garage than meets the eye, that could be something that would go into our consultant's plan that is put out to the public. So developers that are looking to do a massing plan say, okay, well, and there's a parking garage there that we could incorporate and come up with various uses for. So in other words, it's a huge asset. To knock it down costs a lot of money. To put something back that when you're gonna need parking anyway. So I just think it's something that could be included. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I would close out by saying, if the hospital ends up being raised and it's low-density use, and somebody, I'm thinking as someone who did really big projects, I would look at that garage as a structure that I would put to the city and convince them they need to take it so that I do not have to bear the expense of raising the garage. So my comments are coming from the point of view of if the city took it as public property, why would you want that? Now, it's an asset that has to be maintained, and it does. I see it being maintained all the time. They're fixing the concrete periodically in there, so it would be if it somehow one of the options is for it to move to the city as public property. We really need to think about why would the city want to own that and bear the expense of maintaining that.
I agree with you, Dan. And also because parking is free throughout the city of Havre de Grace, not that couldn't change, so I'm not sure why the city would want to take over a parking garage that they may or may not charge people to park in. I also think that we need to, or maybe we're just starting with the parking garage, but it is based on the development of the property. So if it is a high, dense property of some of the drawings that we've seen in the past, and there was like a lot of apartments, and there was no other parking created for the residents, then the parking garage makes sense. But until we know what's going on the other properties, if we're only going to put, 6 Victorian homes on it, which I know that's not going to happen either, I don't know if we need a parking garage across the street.
It's just part of the plan. I mean, it's part of it. It's not the entire piece, and it is a large parcel looking at this. And you see everything Bel Air's going through with parking. Everything comes down to parking in Bel Air. So go ahead, Clark.
Scott, I hear you say that, well, it's not our property to decide, and I hear you talk about, does the city want to have that? But Tim, has anyone done any research? I'm so old. I remember when that land all on Washington Street was bought for the hospital, and it was bought by the Harford County Commissioners. And I looked after the meeting that you held at the Opera Center, and I went back to some old tax map books, and all the tax map books said for the hospital properties, lands of Harford County Commissioners. If it was taxpayers' land, when did it not become the taxpayers' land? I don't know. Someone ought to look at some of those deeds.
Yeah, I know by looking at aerial photographs that sometime between 80 and 83, those houses on Washington were removed and turned into parking lot. But I don't have any other information besides that.
But if you look, and I'll share this with you, on the old tax map books, all that hospital property was marked lands of Harford County Commissioners.
They still have a parcel there that says Harford County Commissioners.
Pardon?
There's still one parcel in that area that still says Harford County Commissioners.
Okay.
Yeah, somewhere adjacent to the hospital properties.
Yeah, so, I mean, was it bought by the county commissioners with a covenant that as long as it's used as a hospital, it's the hospital land, but if not, does it go back to the county?
Does it have a reverter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll take a look. Thank you. I appreciate that, Clark.
Uh-huh.
Is there anything else from us about this? Go ahead, Jason.
I'm sorry, not to belabor the point about the parking garage, but I tend to agree. I mean, it is an older structure. It takes a lot of maintenance. There is some economic opportunity, I think, within the next decade there. If you're like me and you ever find yourself on an airplane without Wi-Fi, you pick up one of those old magazines, and thumb through them. And I'm very much in favor of like Scientific America, and Popular Science and all that kind of stuff. And there's a big push, or at least from the tech industry's perspective, in the automated vehicles. And I guess in some futurists' minds, eventually, just like hailing an Uber now or a cab, this automated vehicle will come and pick you up and take you to where you need to go. And with that, they need like a space to park. So there could be, in the future, some economic incentive there for the city to use it to help the maintenance costs. However, I'm in agreement that right now, like Dan said, with just the major events is probably where it would be used most by the citizens.
Okay. Good. Well, that maybe moves to like the first question I should have asked, which I'll preface this first part, and then we can just go into more open discussion because I think this will be a longer piece. The hospital has a contract developer. They have not submitted a formal plan to the city for approval, for review, for anything by the Planning Commission. They're just not at that point. But they did put pen to paper and put together a massing study to come up with a general idea of the number of units that they could put on it to make it worthwhile for them if they were to purchase it. They were looking at apartments initially in the existing hospital building, and then they don't think that the hospital can be saved for those purposes, so they would demolish it and they would put in apartment units in a building about the same size as the hospital. I think they would only go about 4 or 5 floors in height, and the rest of the site would be townhouses. So that was just generally what was sketched out by them, that they said, hey, we could, this is potentially what we want to do. What do you guys think? So multifamily is not allowed in the residential office zoning district. So that would totally have to be revised, but townhouses are allowed, duplexes, single family, that sort of thing. So there inevitably will be changes to the district and what's allowed. So what would all of you like to see there? From a residential perspective, should it be mixed use? Are we missing recreation? The types of houses that should be there? This is just a wide open question.
One thing I think for sure, and I think it was clear at the hearing, kind of reverberated through that, is that there was a theme that they didn't want any commercial that would compete with the downtown area. And I think that's important economic development for us, to put our focus on making the downtown great since we're spending so much money in it. Don't put commercial uses up there that compete with downtown.
Yeah, how do we feel about that as EDAB? I think it's a great point. We've talked about it a little bit before. Is there a consensus here?
So Clark, in a follow-up to what you just said, when you said no commercial uses that would compete with the downtown, but you would support a commercial use that isn't currently in the downtown?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, everything there is residential now. If the hospital wasn't there, so I'm not sure.
So if we were, if it was to be a mixed-use development, and mixed use is a big term, and there was a commercial element of whatever, something minimal, 10,000 square feet or 5,000 square feet, would you be in favor of any mixed-use development that includes commercial on that property? And I'm just asking.
I'm thinking.
Okay.
I don't think that's the character of the neighborhood.
Okay.
Personally.
And it would still compete with downtown.
Well, I think if it's retail, it would compete, but like if we're talking about like maybe lawyers' offices or accountants' offices or something like that, like, you know, something that could be considered mixed use, or architects that would consider mixed use. I think the downtown folks are, from the chamber perspective, are just concerned about, you know, foot traffic. You know, I don't see that area being like foot traffic. I think from the reading I've been doing, it seems like senior housing is kind of, you know, lacking right now. And I can see with senior housing, then there could be some commercial uses that would go along with senior housing, like maybe, you know, elder care being there. I mean, I think whatever you put there, the commercial would tie into whatever is there. I don't know if that makes sense, but
that's where I was going with the question, because in that neighborhood, we do have, and have always had for the last 20, 25 years, the doctor's offices. I consider that a commercial use. We had the, I'm not sure if it's there, that was on the corner that sold the hospital or supplies. So I'm not talking about adding a coffee shop, because I know that would make everybody crazy. But if there was, again, if there was doctor offices or lawyer offices, or if there was something that doesn't exist in the downtown, are we opposed to all commercial development on this property?
My answer is no. Dude, you were working it hard, Bridget. Lord. Because I really do. I think, especially on Union, I think that is the part of the commercial property. That's a large parcel of property. But then again, you could have, you know, I'm thinking, and I know we've heard this 1,000 times, but like a boutique hotel, right? You know, maybe 35, 40 rooms, nothing bigger than that, plus other things for mixed use that go with residential. I wouldn't put any type of retail down there. Right. It just wouldn't look like that. And then whatever's behind the property, obviously, depending on what they can squeeze into the density to make this thing work. But I think it would be wrong for Union Avenue not to have a commercial designation with it, whatever that means, for the value on the property. Just for somebody, and that garage, can we own that garage for a second? That garage is such a liability. No one wants that garage, I'm sure. If they did, it would have to have a commercial value across the street from it to be utilized, and that would be at best. Maybe apartments like you mentioned, but that's about it. So I would hope that there would be a study done if anybody gets involved with that garage. Let them keep the garage. I'd prefer they take down the hospital and take down the garage and walk away and then do whatever they do with the property, but that's not going to happen. But I would hope that we all push forward with this to make sure that that hospital doesn't sit there for 5 years vacant. They'll cut the grass, no doubt. So, but that's my concern. That's all.
So to follow up on Charlotte's excellent points, and you know, when any developer that comes that approaches, you mentioned somebody's already approached the hospital. First thing they're gonna do is their massing plan. So they're gonna have to call people like you. They're gonna have to call, well, back up. They're gonna call people like Charlie, Frederick Ward, Beadle. They're gonna start getting a feel for what they can do. How many, what's the mass? What can I get on this? If it's not enough, I'm just walking away. You know, and so we can do that. I mean, have we given thought to what that massing plan would look like? Because I heard a lot of the comments in the last meeting, and, you know, a lot of the people sounded like they wanted things, but from a developer's, and I think that's where that one developer was going, it's not going to yield enough.
Right.
If you want to do your idea, it won't yield enough, so even you as the developer wouldn't do what you're suggesting. So working behind, you know, reverse engineering the property, can't we do that, and have we done that, and do we have a feel for what the mass would be there? And the answer to I don't know the answer to my question, but if it comes back that only high-density apartments really would be attractive to a developer, we at least know that. If it comes back that it could be partially mixed use, you could have some high density, maybe senior housing, maybe apartments, along with townhomes, along with a villa, along with single family, then we have our answer. But Clark, you probably know this better than anyone. Am I wrong, or is this an approach we can look at as EDAB and at least be better prepared?
No, I don't think it's wrong, and I don't disagree with Charlie in the hotel, boutique hotel, and people have said, there's not the demand in Havre de Grace for a hotel, there's not all this. Well, if Belcamp can have 7 hotels and we have all the tourist attractions, why in the world does someone say we can't support a hotel? I don't get that.
The answer, I think, lies in the fact that how the hotels operate. You know, they're looking for I-95 locations. They might not get the massing. It's going to come back to massing. And what type of hotel? When you mention boutique hotel, well, a lot of times that's a mom and pop.
Right.
That's somebody, you know, a developer, you, Bob, somebody like that, working in conjunction with someone that can operate a small boutique hotel. But how many units are you talking? 10 to 14 maybe, as opposed to, you know, a much larger flag that's going to look for an I-95 location. I think that's where they're going. Megan?
Yep.
So you're looking at tourism, staying in these boutique motels, but you're forgetting there's businesses in town here. When we have Bell Helicopter, we have Airbus, we have Boeing come in, where do they stay? Aberdeen.
I-95 hotels.
Aberdeen.
Right.
They don't stay at the Motel 6. So there, to your point about the boutique hotel, excuse me, you got to think about the customers that are coming in. You have Solvay, you have Huber, you have other people coming in. We have customers, and they're staying in Aberdeen. We do have a lot of people coming in from overseas that don't like to drive far. So that's another idea too.
But I also think, Megan, we could get the data on that. I'm not sure. I bet you that a lot of those companies are fine with staying in Aberdeen and coming to you.
They don't have a choice.
But I still think that that's what the hotel industry is going to look at, because we finance hotels at the bank. These are demographic market studies that they undertake before they plop down. They just don't plop down. So I think their data would probably tell them, well, we can reach Havre de Grace from Aberdeen. We don't need another hotel, especially where it would be difficult to build and they'd have restrictions. It's not an I-95 location. But I mean, we can definitely pursue it if we want to court a hotel. But then you're getting into what Clark was getting at earlier, where you are competing with some of your other proprietors in town. And is that a direction you want to go?
So we're trying to draw people into the town here. So we have these people coming in. When they come in, they want crab cakes. The people that come in from Japan love crab cakes. We try to entertain downtown, so it'd be easier if we entertained downtown and they stayed downtown.
Yep. So
I don't disagree. I just think we would have to do the market study
Okay.
to see if it's supported.
in Louisville, where I lived for several years, there's it was called 21C Museum, and it's a museum of this only 21st century museum in the United States, and it's also a hotel. So when you stay there overnight, you also have art actually in your room. So that would be a boutique, but also you'd be tying in the arts district. They also put on like live art shows, live performances. So, you know, something like that, that would be an attraction, not just a hotel, but also an attraction. It would solve a lot of problems. So I think I guess my point is not that we need that, but we need to start think outside the box about what a multi-use would do and how we could do that. And that would separate itself from a Vanderveer. Somebody that wants to stay at a Vanderveer is not going to stay at 21C with modern art. I mean, you're looking at a different type of person, so.
Okay, and just as an FYI, to be clear, we are, Tim, right, we're not looking for consensus among EDAB today. We're not doing a white paper or putting forth a letter of recommendations. The consultants are watching to get all of our viewpoints instead of interviewing us separately. They're listening to all of us. So Clark's not right, I'm not right, Charlie's not right, we're not wrong, but we're not looking for consensus saying EDAB thinks that this property should be this. They're just listening to all of us and taking into our point of views.
Bridget, there is one thing that EDAB could look into. How many employees are at the hospital that we lose?
They've been losing employees over the years, so I need to go and check, meaning some have already moved to the Bel Air. I don't think it was that many.
Okay.
It's in the hundreds.
So just going back in history, in the town of Cambridge, when Campbell Soup pulled out of Cambridge, the state came in, Economic Development Office, and participated by $25 million putting funds into the Grand Hyatt Waterfront Hotel in order to provide jobs for the people that lost them. I think this is a bigger impact of job loss than what they had in Cambridge by far. And maybe there's some leverage that we have that we could use there as well.
Along those lines, because the consultants are listening, if you're trying to like figure out boutique versus brand flag, where you're from, is it Port Charles?
Cape Charles.
Cape Charles, thank you.
I'm from Havre. My grandfather was
Your grandmother, your family.
I
remember you telling me the family's from down there. So do they, that's similar and that's on the water. And obviously these consultants do work in other places. Do they have a boutique? What do they?
I haven't been down there in so long.
Really? Because that's something we could find out from the consultants too. Demographically speaking, what is supported for us? Boutique or large brand, flag, hotel. I don't know, but it'd be nice to copy instead of trying to just take a stab.
Well, I mean, look at St. Michael's, the Inn at Perry's Cabin. They have all of these little hotels in St. Michael's that are very successful. One of them is, oh gosh, I'm trying to think a couple of the names, but they're all little small hotels down there, and they're hard to get into. And we have way more attraction and population and ease of getting off of 95 than you have in St. Michael's.
And they have the flexibility to create what they want. It goes along with what you were saying. They can combine with artistic vision. They can, because it's a proprietor, it's not, you know, a large chain that just puts a cookie cutter hotel in.
But what they do is they're part of a brand, like the Inn at Perry's Cabin is part of a certain group. And there's another one in Charleston, South Carolina, and another one in all these little places. So they have their kind of booking network as part of that.
A lot of your major brands have those too. They're like boutique stay hotel experience or whatever, you know.
Next question.
Bridget's getting bored with our discussion too.
Can I ask one thing?
Good.
Tim, could I ask one thing?
Yeah, for
Are you
sure.
at liberty to discuss what is going on with the hospital property? Because like 7 years ago, when Upper Chesapeake was pitching this whole thing, you know, the thought then was that they would demolish the building. A few years back, they thought, you know, they'll demolish all of it except for the tower because the tower might be marketable. So where are they at with that now? And do we have an idea of the valuation of that total property?
Yeah, I'm not sure of the total valuation of the property. I think you make a good point with the valuation, though, that we're speaking about a lot of the things that could occur there, but the hospital, Upper Chesapeake Medical is probably looking for the highest bidder. So, you know, the highest bidder may be somebody who's proposing that they could do 200 apartment units and not somebody who wants to come in and put a boutique hotel. So we're also somewhat limited by whoever is paying the most for this property, just to keep that in mind as part of this process. The plan is still have the hotel demolished. There are potentially funds available from the state to help with that. The mayor had written a letter last year in support of that. He got a nice review by the secretary. I'm not sure which department it was at the time that had looked at that, but now we're under a different administration. I'm not sure if that will make a difference or not. It's something that I know was a priority for this next legislative session to see if those funds can be secured to help with the demolition of the hospital. That is one of the primary focuses of this project. We still have the commitment from the hospital.
So, I mean, to everybody's point here, I think an open field would be a much different scenario than one with a large building already on it. And there are some tools that, as the local government, aside from zoning, that we can look at, like tax increment financing. Marbidco has some very interesting processes and products that we could tap into to encourage the type of development that we'd like to see, or to help out with, you know, a boutique hotel or something, to make it a little more appetizing and part of our marketing strategy when we go out and talk to folks, assuming that the city would even do that. I don't know if we're actively campaigning with developers, or if this is just a step and the consultants are going to put something together based on all the recommendations from the community, and then that's something that we can use to go out and kind of court some folks.
Yeah, I don't know what initiatives have taken place before. My understanding of the process now was that the hospital folks had put out a request for proposal, basically saying we have this property available, and they chose somebody out of that list who they thought was best for whatever their reasons were for deciding why that person was best. We weren't privy to any of that information. And then we received a massing plan, and that's sort of where we pumped the brakes and felt that the city needed to kind of take their own approach to the project to make sure we got what we wanted from a zoning perspective. And then I don't know what initiatives the city would be willing to take from that point to attract the type of development that comes from this project.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe this is a function of EDAB, but it seems like a more active role would behoove us all. You know, it's great to throw out suggestions and all that good stuff, but, you know, it can be done. I mean, Perryville got Great Wolf Lodge, and it's not like they just came knocking on the door, you know? So maybe an active plan is a good thing for the administration to focus on.
Thank you. Makes sense.
And also in the past, Jason, I think that the relationship with the hospital and the city was a little strained. So there are new players at the table. So I think that the relationship is much better, but it has to be a partnership. And that's what Perryville had with the owners of the property where Great Wolf Lodge is going. So I think we have that now. And hopefully we can, you know, put some initiatives together or a plan, but you know, we didn't even, and I'm saying we because I wasn't even working here during this time, but no, the city wasn't actively promoting the development of a private property owner's property. So now if we have that relationship, we can work together because again, it's still not the city's. If it was ours, we could go for it.
Tim, could I ask you another question?
Sure.
From a planner's side?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this exists or not, but are there some formulas of what planners like to see for the percentage of owner-occupied homes to apartments, and where Havre de Grace falls in that kind of percentage?
Yeah, we're about 2/3 owner to 1/3 rental. That's about where we're at now. There's about 2,000 rental units in the city based on just our records for our rental registration program. We would like to keep that proportion if we can. I mean, that's sort of where we went. I would say that over the years when the census takes place, it doesn't look like there's much of a drop in the number of rental units in the city. There hasn't been a lot of conversions from rental to ownership, but there's just been more owner-occupied houses that's been built. So
Okay.
Bully Rock, Seneca Manor, everything up on the hill, that's changed those proportions a little bit. We're trying to keep it that way. But I guess one thing from a zoning perspective, we can do certain things to encourage housing types that encourage home ownership, but we don't necessarily have any controls on whether something's owned or rented. So if we allowed condos here, for instance, those condos could be converted to apartments or turned into rentals, and that's a more likely scenario than if you had large single-family homes. Not saying that that's what we're going by, but there's some things that lend themselves more to rental than to ownership. So we can control that housing mix, which is sort of related, but we can't really do anything about regulating what's rental and what's not, or those proportions.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Good. Speaking of housing types, is there any thoughts on that? Like I said, in the massing plan, they kind of had this hospital-shaped building that was going to be apartments, and then they were going to line the rest of the area with townhouses. Is there any thought on the types of houses, or what they should look like, or what type of housing you don't want to see, or where you wouldn't want to see certain things? Just as far from a residential perspective.
I think there's more of a demand for the middle-class housing,
Mm-hmm.
families.
Thank you.
But my reaction to that comment, as housing would be developed and placed in, I think the city needs to be, make sure that they have their thumb on the scale from the point of view of how it fits.
Mm-hmm.
How the properties look. The example I go to is what the houses that have gone on Gerard Clark that you built. That one house, you would think it was always there, and it's brand new. So that's what I say fit. I mean, what happened over on Gerard, I think that's a good example, and those weren't spread apart. I forget how many homes you built there, 4 or 5.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, starting 2 more, so it'll be like 6 or 7.
Yeah. So 7. That's.
But it's
in half a block.
interesting to know, and I appreciate your answer that you think we have family demand, but of the 16 places I've built in the last couple years in Havre Grace, I would say 97% are empty nesters. Don't know why, but that's what it ended up in sales.
Well,
when
especially in the next, sorry, especially in the next, 5 to 10 years, all these baby boomers that are going to be retiring, just like you said, I mean, we're really going to see a huge demand for, senior living, assisted care, not really assisted care, but community living like that. So we have to start thinking about what's gonna be best for us, a little bit down the road versus what do we need right now.
So I'm speaking from experience as a mother. When I moved to Havre Grace 7 years ago, I had a very hard time finding a house. And I know other people in the mom community on mom pages. Havre Grace is very desirable. I think it's starting to change, unfortunately, but there was a great push for people to go to Meadowvale. I worked in town here. However, I moved here from Meadowvale Elementary School. And like I said, it's very competitive trying to find a house when you have, from my perspective, like I said, I'm speaking as a mother. People are moving here for the schools.
Good. All right, go back to not the parking garage, but parking generally. So for all new development, 3 places are required. From an industry perspective, that is really high. But there's also a lot of discussion in the community all the time about parking and having enough parking. So just general thoughts on not the parking garage specifically, but parking in this area, parking for commercial ideas on if there are mixed uses down here, or the hospital, they did say that they're looking to keep some medical presence in the community. Just thoughts on how, if residential was there and there was also some commercial element or office element, how those things would all work together and how to make that work in that area.
Tim, the only jurisdiction I've ever worked in, from Cecil County, Harford County, Baltimore County, all over, that had a 3-car parking has been Havre Grace. And I don't know why it came about, but it's probably a little stronger than you need. And in fact, if you're down in town and you try and do that on lots that aren't record platted, you probably chew up more of the street parking to get the 3 parking places off than you gain.
Mm-hmm.
I'll counter that, Clark, in that homes that are built with a garage to qualify for the off-street parking, the preponderance of people today use a garage for their stuff, not a car. And you see the cars parked in the street.
Yep.
I think that happens a lot.
Attacked.
I've seen your garage door open, Clark.
Good. So I know we touched on it a bit. We talked about the fit of certain things in a neighborhood and what they would look like. Obviously, Union Avenue is a very important part of the city and has a very unique architectural look to it. Washington Street, when we walked around with consultants before, the one thing they noticed right away was that all of those houses had porches, and that the houses were pulled all the way up to the front of the street, so they had that relationship to the street. We don't have them in town now, but what are this group's thoughts on architectural design guidelines and the way that things would look in this area when they're redeveloped?
I think it needs to be like walkable, like obviously sidewalks, I'd say probably, not as big of yards, like, if, as a single mom as I used to be, trying to get my kids to mow, I would not want a big yard, so, yeah, and seniors wouldn't either, so, but at the same time, we don't want, no grass area, but I think there needs to be a balance, but I think, walkability would be important.
Specifically on Union, they have setback requirements, right?
On Union, Congress, and another street, it was the ordinance was changed to allow those houses to not have front setbacks, so they were pulled up to the same sight line as their neighbors. You started having new houses coming in that had to follow the zoning code, so you kind of had this back and forth pattern, and they wanted everything kind of lined up.
I mean, I'm in favor of maintaining the current aesthetic if we're talking about private residences. From a developer perspective, I don't know how you would do that to make it profitable. But so if they're if I don't know, just entertain me for 1 second.
Yeah, for sure.
So if Upper Chesapeake moving out of Havre de Grace, one of the arguments was that building was too old, it was no longer maintainable, it didn't make sense economically, etc. We know by the number of red alerts or red lines for emergency rooms in Harford County that there is a significant need for additional hospital space. If that old building is demolished and that problem is resolved, I mean, would it make sense for another hospital to build there, or even Upper Chesapeake itself? I have no idea what the economics are involved in hospital development or anything like that. Yeah. Would it be ironic though if another hospital were built there?
Somebody had mentioned, and I didn't even think about this because they are a private entity, but I didn't think of them this way because it is a hospital and they serve a public need. Was they're also a business? Would they sell that property to their competition? Yeah, I don't know. Probably not if you think about it from that perspective. But yeah, again, I mean, this comes down to I can't say for sure what their criteria was, why they decided this contract developer. But surely economics came into it. I'm sure it was one of the higher bids from what was proposed from other people would be my guess. And speaking with that developer, just some of the conversations we had, and I think they were pretty good, about retail space and having a mixed-use environment there, is that if you have a vacant retail space there, it doesn't help anybody. If you walk by and, we're saying, you need so much something there, whatever it is that we say that they have, or you need so much housing there. I mean, you're going to have vacant space potentially, and it doesn't look good for anybody. So we have to allow the market to kind of operate a little bit, but that doesn't mean that, I think there's been really good conversation today about having a partnership with them and trying to work with the State Economic Development Office. I think there's a lot of things that we just never had went down that road before that's come from this group today. So that's good. I think there's ways to get where we want to if we work on it, and we're not, that's why I guess the city's taking their own path, because we don't want to be stuck under the hospital's idea of what's good for the city. We want all of us to work together for what's good for the city. So I think this is a good conversation.
And that's what the consultants should come back with, right? Is an
That
idea.
is, yeah. Yep. Now I mean, the hospital is on their stakeholder list, but they've been just involved as all of you are today, as the planning commission is. Their contract, they had so many stakeholder interviews, and we couldn't give all the money, all the taxpayer money away to the consultants for them to continue to work with the hospital group. So they are involved. We have asked their input, and we've had great discussions with them. But before we started this process, the city decided to hire consultants and go on their own track to do this project.
So the consultants would produce kind of a massing plan, some type of RFP to put out to the hospital?
No, it would be a form-based code. So it would be
So say more
changes to
about
the
that.
zoning code.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so
Based as. go
yeah,
ahead.
so they'll look at all the area that'll be vacant, and they're going to look at the surrounding area in the RO district, and they're going to look to see what, instead of just saying, hey, boutique hotels and all this other stuff are possible, the first thing they're going to look at is trying to make the area fit together again. So they'll look at again, Union Avenue different than they'll look at Lodge Lane. Then they'll look different from Revolution to Lewis. That'll be different from Washington. So they're going to treat all those streets differently and come up with the form itself of what will fit. And then later they'll go back in and say what the uses should be. So it could be a hotel, it could be apartments, it could be a single family home that size, but it'll be something that fits on Union. So at first we're looking at the structure and making everything fit back together, and then deciding on what things should be incorporated into those forms.
So that means it's an architectural type?
It starts architectural, and then there's a sub-consultant they have called Code Studio. They're from Austin, and they'll take that information and we'll put it into, it'll be a mixed code of those visuals and words, laws. I'll send Bridget a link also. There's a nice 9-minute video that summarizes the form-based code process and why it works and that sort of thing. So I'll also send her that link. Good. Let me just check to see what else is on here. Lodge Lane was brought up a lot. Are there any thoughts from this group on reopening Lodge Lane or allowing it to be developed over and continue the way that it is? Are there any thoughts on that?
I think it would be great to reconnect Lodge Lane, but again, it all depends on the development in the project that they have. I could see why a developer would not want to do that,
Right.
Taking up more acres, but just in general, as a city person or city planner in economic development, I think the continuity there would be great, like it used to be.
Bridget, I agree with that. I also think they ought to look at not having Lewis Lane as one-way anymore, perhaps without the emergency room. I thought that might have been the driving force for that. That probably would help the linkage of our road system in the city.
Agreed.
I think at the present time, though, I think it should not be pushed really hard, because I think it's a better idea parcel-wise to have that large piece of parcel and not with the intent of putting the road back in. And then it opens up other businesses or whatever that may come in, however that's developed. Now, if it all went residential, of course, I understand that and I agree with that. But I just don't see Union Avenue. It's got to be mixed of something just for somebody to afford to do it. In my short, limited, thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been any discussion or thought of having an educational use there?
I know a lot of people had suggested that we get a hold of one of the community colleges and see if they would be interested. Again, it goes to the hospital deciding why they're working with who they're working with. We don't know what that criteria is. I'm not sure if anybody's reached out directly and asked if any of those institutions would be willing to move in, but I know that has been one of the interests that were brought up by the public that's come up pretty often. Good. Just two more questions, just to go back to one more issue that kind of has to do with the look and the fit of the area. I think one of the towers at the hospital now is 7 stories. I think other parts are, most parts are 4 to 5. I'm not exactly for sure. Are there any thoughts about height in the area and how tall things should be or not be?
Well, I think we're kind of all in agreement. I think it should fit into the aesthetic that's there now. I mean, a 7-story, I don't think anything above 7 stories, I think that would take away from, you know, the quaintness.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think it really depends on what's going to go in there, but,
Yep.
you know, I can see, you know, as a citizen who lives in the area, I wouldn't want a 20-story apartment building built right there. You know, but if 7 stories are already there, then, you know.
I think it's just the one tower is 7 stories, and then the rest is.
How would that fit in with zoning?
Yeah, I mean, the
That
form.
ain't gonna fit.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not. But yeah, I mean, sometimes people, we had a meeting, I forgot who it was with, but someone was like, we have a 12-story such and such somewhere in town. Hell, let them build it as high as they want if they want to build it that high. Things are changing, you know, I mean, so that you get different
Well,
points of view.
you get an apartment up on the top floor and you get a hell of a view.
Yeah, you would.
But
Good.
not so sure that fits form zoning.
I would mostly agree. But this is your input session. Last question, is there anything about the site or anything historically that you'd want to be recognized or preserved that's there currently? So I know the existing building we talked about taking down and all that stuff, but does it require some sort of recognition or preservation in any way?
I think photographing and keeping a history for the town is enough. I don't think there's anything there that I see as particularly compelling.
Great. Good. All right, I have a couple links to get to Bridget, so you guys can send more information online if you like. You're always welcome to email me or call my office if you think of anything. I'll also send that video so you can kind of see what form-based code is. He's more, the person describes it as more of an expert and has a full 9 minutes to kind of go through everything. I think that'll help everybody understand a little bit better how it fits. And yeah, if there's any other questions or input or advice or anything that you have, please let us know. September 11th, Planning Commission meeting, if you want, anybody wants to be here for that. It'll also be live streamed and kept on YouTube, recorded on YouTube for later. And then September 28th, 6:30 at the Star Center, we'll have another public input meeting there for the public at large, not just the Planning Commission. And again, that won't be a listening session like that last time. There'll be some more concrete stuff to look at, probably be smaller groups going around to different stations to discuss different forms, different types of architecture, different types of housing. And so I think that'll be a more unique event. And all that information comes from all the help I got from all of you today. So thank you.
I have one last question.
Sure.
Do we know what the cost of demolishing all the structures?
I sent an email out today. I'd actually gotten I spoke to somebody else and they thought that just knowing those costs would be good perspective for the public to help realize that certain things couldn't occur at that site just based on the cost to take care of what's there.
Okay, so I'm gonna restate this to a statement rather than a question. I think it is imperative that you know the cost of demolition of that property down below, taking everything down below grade and clearing the property. From the point of view of somebody's going to redevelop that property, they have to do that. And then so they're gonna need to recoup that cost plus all the interest during construction that they're going to incur. So when you look at that, that's going to give you an idea of an order of magnitude of project that has to occur in order to recoup the cost of demolishing. If the developer is demolishing, if the hospital swallows that cost, that's a different story. So I think it's imperative that the city has a good idea of what the demolition costs would be, because then that's going to show you what potentially is going to be brought to the city if the hospital finds a developer who will be raising the property with their cost, at their cost.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, and I don't think it matters who demolishes it. If the hospital demolishes it, they're gonna want their money back for that, and they're gonna want a higher bidder. And if it's the developer that does it, and they demolish it, they're gonna wanna put something there that, brings them back to the profitability that they want. So I literally sent out this email 2 hours ago to the hospital people. I'm not sure if they're willing to, there's some things they're just not willing to share for business reasons, which I understand. But if they do allow that, that question's out there, so I hope to hear back from them.
Yeah,
think it does.
someone can do that. That's a rule of thumb. Okay, a question to an architect or an engineering firm, that's a rule of thumb. Or the city can actually pick the phone up and call a demolition company, and they'll give you an idea what that will cost. Because when I hear, reason why I ask that, I hear discussions about, well, there's going to be 20 lots, you could put Victorians in it. That to me, that's a big no. I'm not going to say it's never going to happen. That's the only avenue I see that would happen is if the hospital did the demolition at their cost and then sold off the lots without trying to recoup the cost of demolition.
Right?
Didn't you just indicate that the state was going to provide some funding for that?
There's funding available for it. The mayor has reached out into the secretary of, I'm not sure what department that was in, but it was in the last administration. But I know that is a focus of the, for the next legislative session, is to move to have those funds available. I'm not sure how much that funding is, and I don't know how much the demolition costs, but we are looking we're supporting the hospital seeking the funds to get the help for that. So we hope that comes through. I spoke to somebody about getting a demolition estimate from our perspective, but I think with a hospital, there's so much medical waste and different things that make it environmentally particular. I'm not sure that could be done without the cooperation of the hospital. I think we're just waiting. I don't think it'll be an issue. I think we're just waiting on them to provide us.
They should be required to remediate the building to where it can be. And that's where, I know if I was looking at, if I wanted to put a project there, I would be saying, no, you used it as a hospital. You do the remediation. I will demolish the structure once
Right.
it's remediated.
Right.
And
Yeah,
that would be the quid pro quo there, and
Yeah.
that's where I would draw my financial line. But then I know, okay, I have to raise this thing to the ground, and then I have to build something, and the whole time, my interest meter is spinning on the money that I spent
Right.
raising the building.
Yeah. No, I agree with you completely. The city in that scenario is the third party. We're out of that situation. So that would be the developer or the hospital working out who's going to do that and how much the cost is. The city gaining that information from them is a little bit more difficult. We have to kind of depend on them to give it to us. I don't see why it's an issue, but I assume it'll come sooner rather than later, especially if we're supporting them on grant funds to have that done.
But I also think what Dan's saying is there are rules of thumb on demolition. We know how many square feet. And this is where I was going with a massing plan. We can play developer. I mean, it's just a pretend game. A developer's going to call in, you know this, and they're going to go through the exercise. And part of the first step is going to be demolition. What's it cost to get into the site? So using rules of thumb, I would think the consultants or us as a city could play developer and say, all right, here's the massing plan. And because if it's costly, which it's going to be, then you have to go to the higher yielding products. So you're into apartments, you're trying to maximize density on the site to have a return that covers the interest carry plus the demolition cost on the front end.
I guess what's the goal of that project, though? I mean, like, what if they're profitable at 250 apartments, but you could build 1,000, you could build 2,000? I mean, the hospital's going to take the person that's going to give them the most money. So the person that's going to give them the most money is the person who says they could build 2,000 units. I mean, if you do that exercise, I think it's fruitful to a point for us to understand maybe what a break-even point would be. But as far as profitability and all those things, it's a private matter between the hospital and whoever they sell that property to. And they're going to sell it to the highest bidder. So regardless of our exercise, they could always do more.
Are they limited to what's allowed?
Yeah, absolutely. They can't just come in and build thousands of units. I mean, if they don't have the ability to, because
Right. But so, I mean, so what would our goal be? To say 300 is profitable, that's what you'll live with?
Well,
Or we found that 250 is profitable, so that's what you would live with? I guess I don't understand what the point of the exercise is.
No, but it would be, it's a piece of data we do not have.
What would we use that data point for?
to understand what the threshold is, what the minimum threshold of what some developer would bring to us. And then now we know
But
where
the
to
developer's
start.
not bringing anything to us.
Yeah,
They're bringing something, but we're not, but that's what I'm saying, the city's a third party. So, the exchange of the hospital property to a private entity to develop, they have to follow our zoning code, but we're not involved in that monetary exchange and the reasoning between that private exchange of property.
Okay, so I'm with you, and I'll just close that by saying, if I had my team and I wasn't retired and I was working again, I would be turning to the engineer right now, and I'd be telling the engineer, using your rule of thumbs, tell me, because I want that, it's a piece of data that's not filled in on the sheet,
Right.
okay?
But you're buying the property.
No,
Potentially.
if I was developing a property.
Right.
If
That's
I
what I'm
was
saying.
looking to develop that property, that would be on my short list of
Yeah.
first things I need to know. Because one, that ends up being a negotiating piece for me in the hospital, right?
But not for the
I
city.
need to know what they know.
Right, but the city's not negotiating.
No,
Price of
Now, we understand that, Tim,
yeah,
but
okay,
we're
I-
saying
Right.
we need to know, it's smart for us to know what a developer's going to do. And the way you figure out what a developer's going to do is you play developer and you run the scenario. Because I can guarantee you, they're not going to come in here and say, well, I'm just going to put up 5 houses.
Yeah. Well, I have that. I can share the massing study with you. You don't have to do the work. But
be
that
great.
massing study is the minimum for them. Nothing stops them from going higher. Nothing stops them from going lower. Nothing stops us from having a partnership and doing a boutique hotel. I mean, you can do it if you want. I guess I'm trying to. I had a friend who owns a company, and he got really into this idea that he could. I might have mentioned this to Jason the other day. He got really into this idea that he wanted to patent things for his project. So he would take something that was like really close to it and change it just a little bit and then send in the patent application, and he would get denied. And he would get denied until he changed the project so much that he created something that was absolutely obsolete, but he got the patent. And I'm just wondering, from a city perspective, from your perspective, are we just sort of moving down the line and creating something that's not really useful for us?
I think it goes back to, I mean, this whole conversation is like ifs and wishes and dreams and hopes and all that good stuff. And forgive me, but EDAB has, anybody that's been on here long enough, we've gone through this exact exercise with what's up on 95 and with the downtown property several times, off-site huddles. And now that we're getting into a situation where this is becoming very real, I think it absolutely makes sense to try and have like a baseline to say, okay, well, you know, here's where the bar is going to be for anything to be profitable for anybody and any wish and hope and dream that we may have. And then these are the things that fit in that scope and the realm of possibility. And that's why I was saying, I think it would be good for EDAB to understand that so that they can give that information to Bridget when Bridget is soliciting, you know, folks outside of perhaps what a typical developer would be looking at. Then we can craft like a plan to help incentivize those situations, you know. So, I mean, more information is not a bad thing.
Yeah, if I get the demo numbers, I'll give them to you. And if you guys can work something with them, that's great.
But I think it should be mentioned too, I mean, you have a massing plan, and obviously the developer is looking at that and saying, this is what I think would be a profitable scenario for me. That's probably a good bit of information to work off of, maybe.
Well, see, that's what I was saying. I mean, say like 200, say they offer 240 units. Why wouldn't 200 units be profitable, but the hospital's selling it to the 240 person because they're making more money? That's why I'm not sure where, I mean, if you want to go through.
Question? Why are they selling it to the
No.
240 person?
I know why they're selling to the 240 person, but if you're saying, hey, we have this massing study, so 240 is the baseline for profitability, this is what we should be thinking about. Profitability could be at 150, but maybe they got proposals for somebody that offered 170 units, thought 180, 200. They took from the person who was going to pay them the most money for the land.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that.
Okay.
It's just that I'm not as concerned about the number of units.
Okay.
But I think that the exercise leads you into what feasibly could go there. Like single family versus apartment unit.
Right.
Density
Yeah,
is
right.
kind of where I'm going to fit the form
Gotcha.
you suggested.
Okay.
So, you know,
Yeah, okay. I sent the email earlier anyway for the numbers, so.
It would help us manage our expectations and know where to focus our intellectual energy at.
Gotcha.
Because, you know, sitting through the last meeting, you know, several people talked about just dropping a few single-family homes and a nice big wide open
Yeah.
area down there. And, we're looking at each other in the seats going, yeah, there's no possible way you could do that unless you were charging $2 million for those homes. But those are the things we can just kind of take off the table and stop thinking about if we know where the basement is. We
Okay.
have to be thinking of that level and above.
Let me see, actually, maybe I got an email during the discussion. Nope, nothing yet, but if I get that email, I have the request out for the demo cost, so we'll know that.
Yeah, I mean, Lyle had indicated, and again, this is 7 years ago, 2016, that it would be around 25 million to walk away from that property. I don't know where we are in 2023 dollars, and I don't know what all that encompassed, if that encompassed any outside funding source such as state. So it would be interesting to see, if the state were able to help the hospital a little bit in that situation, and I would think that that would be the scenario more than a private developer in the demolition of the building. That would always be good information to have as
Yep.
well. And I'm sure that the hospital is taking that calculus into consideration already.
I'm real excited about the idea of following that, like, really hard, and I hope that the city will. And if first you don't succeed, try it again on the demolition, because I think that is the key thing to the whole thing of the hospital, because people would rather see it gone, of course, and then nothing there, as opposed to, a 10-story building. But what a good, if they would pull the trigger and we could get funds to help them.
Yeah.
And there is this account, this mystery, a demolition account in the budget somewhere. I think you should try for it every year for the next 5 years while we're going down this path.
Yeah, I know that is an initiative of the city. And I said our legislative liaison has been told that should be a priority for him to speak with our delegates and state senators about to make sure that funding's available for this project.
Absolutely.
So good
We
we're on
won't
the same
forget,
page.
is all I'm saying.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
it's definitely, no, it's, I think, a priority for everybody. I mean, the hospital had promised some time ago that no matter what happened, they would tear down the building itself.
Did they
But-
put that in writing to you?
Of course not.
I
Of
didn't
course
think
not. And yeah, and they're still committed to it, but there was somebody who mentioned during one meeting, it depends how this redevelopment goes and if they have a contractor at the time to go forward.
Right.
So you never know. But we're doing our best for sure. Good. If I get those demolition numbers, I'll let Bridget know, or I'll let her know that they didn't divulge them to us for whatever reason. All right. Thank you, everybody. Look forward to seeing you at the next meetings.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. I think we looked, right, so. So do we have citizen comments on here next, Bridget? Any comments from the citizens? But if we have some follow-up comments, let's make them now, otherwise we're getting close to 5:30, so I would push to adjourn next. Bridget, do you have anything you'd like to add after that?
I do not.
Okay.
Well, actually, I do. I was about to say I do not, and then
Being recorded, and you
I
just said you
know,
didn't
right?
have anything to say.
It's because we're being recorded and we're being really good. I had the best joke, I'm telling you, when he asked did we want to include anything with history and I looked over at Clark, and the reason why when we said completely take pictures, because Clark, I thought we would memorialize our date of birth in that hospital, but I didn't know if everybody else would get it. So maybe that will not be happening. But thank you everyone for today. I think this was some really good feedback, and I also wanted to say, just in terms of, I think the demolition numbers are very important, but there is a lot of funding available at the state. You just have to go in the pots, and the reason why we have to work a little differently from the city, because when you apply for demolition funding, then you have a certain amount of time to use it. So we don't need to apply for it now because we're not sure when they're going to move forward with the demolition. But just watching other projects around the county and the states and stuff, I am sure the hospital is probably on this. I know they probably have lobbyists for these types of things. I think the demolition funding is going to be the least of the project, but I do understand the importance of wanting to know the number here.
I've demoed 7-story beta hotel, the 6-story beta thing. The cost is not as much in having them implode the building down, it's getting rid of all the asbestos and
Yep.
those things is where the money runs into.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's where the detail matters, right? And these are costs for developers. Somewhere, there's a developer that's got to pitch this to his investors or who, and they've got to say, well, what's the demolition cost? And that is going to be part of the negotiation. So those are all excellent points, and I think we have something we can, kind of work behind the scenes to play develop ourselves and see what is feasible there. Okay, anything else for the good of the group? If that's it, then I'll just need a motion to adjourn.
So,
All right.
Second.
All in favor?
aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you all. Great job.